Welcome back to the Olive Grove podcast. You know we love digging deep into the roots of captivating topics. And today we're diving into Zechariah.
Oh, yeah.
Specifically chapter 10. Now this is a chapter that speaks to final victory, the millennial reign. But it also offers some pretty relevant wisdom for us right now, for navigating our world today.
Yeah, it's interesting. Zechariah weaves together this picture of a future utopia, but he also gives us advice on how to recognize false prophets, how to find strength in God when things feel chaotic.
It's like he's saying, hey, this incredible future is coming, but in the meantime, here's how to stay on track. And speaking of staying on track, we actually need to rewind a bit back to the end of chapter 9.
Right.
Verse 9.17 sets the stage for the blessings that we see unfold in chapter 10.
Yes. Verse 9.17 talks about the abundance of grain and new wine. And in ancient Israel, those were vital for survival and prosperity. So it's hinting at a time when God's people will not only be sustained, but truly flourish.
So it's not just about having enough. It's about having more than enough. But then, in 10.2, the tone kind of shifts a bit. It talks about enemies and the dangers of false prophets.
Yeah, and this verse goes into this practice called divination. It was really common in the ancient world. People would try to predict the future by examining the entrails of animals or consulting mediums. It was a way of seeking guidance outside of God's will.
You know, it makes you think about how even back then, people were searching for answers, looking for someone to tell them what to do. But Zechariah is warning against relying on these false sources.
Absolutely. And, he compares those who are misled to sheep without a shepherd. It's such a striking image.
Yeah.
The vulnerability, being lost. It really highlights the danger of not following the true shepherd.
And that brings us to verse 10.3, where Yeshua is identified as the true shepherd. It's a powerful declaration that he will confront and defeat those who lead people astray, both human and spiritual enemies.
We see this theme throughout the Bible, this idea of a faithful remnant who stand for truth even when facing deception. Reminds me of the 144,000 witnesses in Revelation 7, those who remain true to God during a time of great tribulation.
It's like a reminder that no matter how chaotic things get, God always has his people, those who are holding on to his promises. And speaking of holding on to something, verse 10.4 introduces these powerful images of a cornerstone and a tent peg.
Yes, these images. They're so rich with meaning. The cornerstone was essential for stability in a building, and the tent peg held the entire structure in place. They represent Yeshua as the foundation, the one who holds everything together.
It's a beautiful picture of his enduring strength and authority, even when it feels like the world is rejecting him.
Exactly, and that rejection, it's only temporary. Zechariah emphasizes that Yeshua will ultimately return. As conqueror and ruler, he will establish his kingdom and reign in righteousness.
That's a powerful message of hope, especially when we consider what verse 10.5 says about final victory over demonic forces.
And that promise extends specifically to those who belong to God. It assures us that even though we might face trials and hardships in this life, ultimate victory is ours, through Yeshua.
And yet, thinking about this battle between good and evil makes you wonder how intense things might get before that final victory.
Well, verse 10.111 introduces this concept of a sea of trouble, which many scholars believe is a reference to the Great Tribulation, a time of intense persecution and judgment.
It's a sobering reminder that, even though the future holds immense joy and peace, there's a period of intense struggle that precedes it.
Right. But it's important to note that this period is not the end. It has a defined duration, 7 years according to some interpretations, and ultimately God's justice and righteousness will prevail.
So it's like a tunnel, a dark and difficult passage, but there's light at the end.
Exactly. And navigating that tunnel requires relying on God's strength, which is precisely what verse 10.11 emphasizes. It's a reminder that we can't face these challenges on our own. We need to walk in God's name, seeking his guidance, and trusting in his power.
It's like we need that cornerstone and tent peg, holding us steady as we journey through these turbulent times.
Precisely. We need that unshakable foundation to anchor us and guide our steps.
You know, as we're talking about this journey, this idea of finding strength, navigating difficult times, it reminds me of the importance of community, having others to walk alongside us. And for anyone listening who's looking for that kind of support and encouragement, I want to take a moment to talk about My Christian Space.
It's a really great online community where people can connect with others who share their faith. It's a great place to learn, grow, and find support, especially when you're facing challenges.
It's like a virtual olive grove,
Oh.
where you can gather with like-minded individuals, delve deeper into Scripture, and encourage one another. They have thought-provoking discussions, insightful Bible studies, and even early access to new episodes of the Olive Grove podcast.
Oh, wow. That's great. And for those who feel called to serve others, My Christian Space also highlights organizations like Enduring Freedom Ministries, who are doing amazing work around the world.
Yes. And one of their current initiatives is establishing a food pantry in Jerusalem. They're working to combat food insecurity in the community and provide practical support to those in need.
It's really inspiring to see them putting faith into action, reaching out with compassion and generosity to make a tangible difference in people's lives.
Imagine being part of a movement that brings that same sense of abundance and blessing. That we see in Zechariah. To those who are struggling, it's a powerful opportunity to share God's love in a practical way.
If you feel led to support this mission, you can find more information about Enduring Freedom Ministries on their website. Any contribution, no matter how big or small, can truly make a difference.
It's a beautiful way to live out the message of Zechariah, extending that hope and provision to those who need it most. But now, let's shift back to our deep dive into Zechariah chapter 10. We've been exploring these powerful themes of victory, strength, and the importance of following the true shepherd. But as with any deep dive, it's important to surface and connect these ideas to our lives today.
Yeah, it really begs the question. In a world flooded with information and opinions, how can we discern truth from falsehood? How can we be those sheep who recognize the voice of the true shepherd and avoid being led astray?
It's a constant challenge, isn't it? We're bombarded with messages from all sides.
Yeah.
And it can be hard to sift through it all and figure out what's real and what's not.
It really is. But Zechariah reminds us that true wisdom comes from seeking God's guidance. We need to be discerning, to test the spirits, and to anchor ourselves in His Word.
And it's not just about avoiding deception. It's also about finding strength and hope when we face trials and difficulties. Zechariah paints a picture of some pretty intense challenges. But he also emphasizes that God is with us through it all.
Exactly. Remember verse 10.12, it tells us to walk in God's name, to rely on His strength. It's a reminder that when we face those seas of trouble, we don't have to face them alone.
It's like having those images of the cornerstone and tent peg etched in our minds. The reminders that even when things feel shaky, we have a firm foundation to hold on to.
Precisely. And as we come to the end of our deep dive into Zechariah chapter 10, I want to leave you with a final thought. The chapter culminates with a beautiful image of peace and security after a period of intense struggle. But what does that peace truly look like?
It's a great question to ponder. If the millennial reign represents a time of ultimate unity and harmony, what steps can we take now in our own lives and communities to foster that same spirit?
It's a challenge to be peacemakers, to build bridges instead of walls, to extend grace and understanding even in the face of disagreement.
It's a reminder that the work of building God's kingdom starts right here, right now, with each of us. So planting seeds of hope and unity, even in the midst of a world that often feels divided.
Absolutely. And, if you're searching for a community where you can nurture those seeds and connect with others who are on a similar journey, I highly recommend checking out My Christian Space.
Yeah. You can find a link to their website in the show notes, along with more information about Enduring Freedom Ministries and their incredible work establishing that food pantry in Jerusalem.
And don't forget to subscribe to the Olive Grove podcast on YouTube so you don't miss out on any of our upcoming deep dives. We explore all sorts of fascinating topics, from biblical prophecy to practical wisdom for daily living.
We release new episodes every week, and by subscribing, you'll be the first to know when they drop. You can also visit the My Christian Space website for early access to new episodes and some exclusive content that we only share with our online community.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Zechariah chapter 10. We hope you found it insightful, thought-provoking, and maybe even a little challenging.
We encourage you to keep exploring these themes, to keep seeking truth, and to keep growing in your faith.
And until next time, may you find strength in the true shepherd and walk in the peace and hope of His promises.